18?
Yeah, but this one, I think that it's really interesting. Like today, I've been in 2 schools, one in W10, All Saints, and another one up in Middlesex. And I just feel this sort of disconnect between a lot of people's lives and politics. And it's not just that they look at politics and think, it's got nothing to do with me. It's actually that it's a mixture of kind of apathy and cynicism and a total lack of understanding of what it is and what it's meant to do. And I guess it's trying to say to people, look, we can either all turn away from it and say it doesn't matter, or actually we can try and understand that we all do have agency if we decide to use it. So what can I do? The answer is we do whatever we can. The title of the book actually comes from people who say that to me all the time. You must get the same. You had, in fact, I heard on the car in, there was somebody, your last call, where you were basically saying you're basically frustrated. What can you do? People really feel that. And I think we have to sort of energise people and motivate them to say, well, we can get involved. And so the first part is really a sort of analysis of where it's all gone wrong: populism, polarisation, post-truth, Brexit, Trump, etc. The second part is a bit self-helpy. It's about how do you look after yourself when you're pressure, and how do you build teams, how do you use alliances and all that sort of stuff. And the third part is how do you go into politics if that's what you want to do. And what was great about this school this afternoon, there was a group, it was a Hayden school, and there was a group came from Pinner High School. And they started off really kind of quite a bit shy and not quite sure what they were saying and what they knew. By the end of it, honestly, they were coming up with ideas that were really interesting, and they had energy and they had life.
It is interesting, isn't it, when you go and speak to schools, which I used to shy away from because I was never sure I'd get the tone right. Could I really relate to them? I'm sure you must feel that as well. But once you've done a few of them, you actually get quite inspired by what you're getting back.
Totally. Well, they ended up, a group of about 8 or 10 of them walked me to the tube station to come back, and they were sort of buzzing with ideas and energy. And you think, I actually said, they ended up saying, can we go on your Instagram? And I did an Instagram live with them, and they were coming up, they were shouting out ideas. And also, I think there's an anger in people at the moment, and they don't know where it goes. So there was a young guy there who was, I think his background, he was I think he was Iraqi originally, lived in Norway, then came here. And he was just going on about Suella Braverman and Rwanda, and there was an anger in him that was visceral. But it was like, he was sort of, but what do you do? What can you do? And the point I'm making both in the book and in everything else I'm doing at the moment is that obviously, it won't surprise you to know that I really, really, really hope that Labour win the election and Keir Starmer's Prime Minister. But we need a lot more.
That's the headline I've been looking for.
but we need a lot more than a change of government. We need a change of politics. There's so much now. We're stuck.
You see, I think you've written this book from the same sense of frustration that I wrote my book 3 years ago, Why Can't We All Just Get Along?
Yeah.
Where I've just got so frustrated by the tenor of public debate.
Well, that's why I do this podcast with Rory Stewart, and I think it's why it's successful as well, is because we disagree agreeably, or we try to.
Do you feel, though, that sometimes you get a little bit too frustrated and angry in public, and that it's sort of slightly... I didn't see it, but somebody was telling me that you kind of lost your rag on Newsnight the other night.
I did. And if people want a long discussion of this, they can go to The Rest is Politics with me, Alastair Campbell, and him, Rory Stewart. I did. And I wasn't very happy with myself because... But you're a
human being. It happens. I from time to time, I will lose my temper on this programme and call a caller an idiot or something, which I shouldn't really do. But.
Well, I think I'll tell you what happened with me is that... So I know you quite well. I know that we're from different political persuasions. I know that you were a Brexiteer and I'm not. But I also know that you kind of think intelligently about stuff. And what I found about the woman that I was on with on Newsnight, I just thought, I'm talking to somebody who doesn't even think about this stuff. And there comes a point where you say, oh, sorry, I can't be bothered with this. I'll just say what I really think.
But 60-odd-year-old man versus young woman never works, does it?
66 this month.
66?
I know. I'm getting my pension.
I feel positively young.
No, honestly, I can't stand the idea of picking up a pension. I know I should be feel happy and that the state's being so generous with me, but I really don't.
I've read a couple of the reviews of your book, which I'm sure you were expecting. some people to be slightly sniffy about it. Charlotte Ivers in the was it the Times or the Sunday Times? She says she was left with the impression that, and this is a quote from the review, if you voted for Brexit or for Boris Johnson, then I'm sorry, Alastair Campbell thinks you're thick. Now, well, I'm sure you would deny that, but do you ever feel that you're a bit too bellicose in some of the arguments that you put forward?
No, not really. In fact, I actually made a speech last week, and it's reflected in the book, that I think that those people on the Remain side of the argument who do think like that are making a terrible mistake, because I understand why some people voted Brexit. I absolutely believe that they were lied to and they were conned by Johnson and Farage and other people. But I do understand that when you're promised the sort of sense of change and hope and positivity and optimism, that you might go for it. But honestly, the reviews really, honestly, don't bother me. There was that read to me like a review that had been written to order, because actually, it doesn't. Funny, the book actually says the opposite of that. So I wonder whether she'd even read it, to be absolutely frank.
The ultimate objective of the book, I suppose, is to inspire younger people who read it. And given the success of the podcast that you're doing with Rory Stewart, and I don't know what the demographics of that are, but I suspect it is quite on the young side. How do you feel that? I mean, can you point to any concrete evidence that the kind of dialogue that you've engaged in? I mean, a bit like Jackie and I do on our For the Many podcast, where we are from different sides of the political fence. I can't remember that we've ever fallen out, but the criticism that we sometimes get, and I think you get as well, too cosy. Your podcast is sort of slagging, or initially I think was a bit slagging off Boris Johnson, slagging off Brexit, and let's all agree on that. And I think we fall into this trap on some other things as well, where people do want to have a choice, though, don't they? Because it can't all be cosy. There has to be disagreement.
Yeah, totally. And we disagree on a lot. So, but I think that what we try to do, and I found it very interesting doing this, because I am, as you say, quite naturally bellicose. I do like a good argument.
You're tribal as well.
I'm very tribal.
Much more than Rory is.
And yeah, absolutely. Much more tribal. I will rise to the bait if somebody... I don't suffer fools. And I love a good argument, and I won't step back. But what I found really interesting is the one time when we did have a really bad fallout on the podcast was a thing over Northern Ireland some time ago. The listeners absolutely hated it. And I think they prefer it when we test each other's opinions. You know, the most listened to episode so far was when we did 2 hours on Iraq, where I think they felt that I was listening to the questions, really giving them sort of proper respect. Rory was being prosecutorial without being aggressive. And I think people just felt, well, why can't we sort of all talk like that? It's a bit like the theme of of your book. But I do. The thing you said about trying to the demographics. So when we did an event at the Albert Hall, and it was ridiculous. Honestly, it's ridiculous. We sold out the Albert Hall in no time. It's ridiculous when you think about it. Two old blokes, kind of. Well, he's not that old, but two old blokes sort of sitting around talking about the old days. It's just crazy on a way. But
when you walked on stage, were you really nervous for that?
No,
you weren't.
No. Is that bad?
But I mean, that's a big thing, isn't it?
I know, but I just don't get nervous about speaking. It's really weird. I didn't even really used to, but I don't get nervous, but I psych myself up. It's a different thing. I do psych myself up. And I write in the book about these these techniques that I have. I have these techniques, some of which I've given to like world leaders, how you switch your brain on. I literally have visualize this switch inside my brain, and I switch it on, and I go out, and I get energy from it. So no, I didn't get nervous. And the other thing I find about this school I was at, one of the second school I went to today, I was talking about how it's a big theme in the book is about how private schools teach their kids to be confident, teach them how to communicate, teach them how to feel that their opinion matters. And I want that to happen in state schools. I'm a great believer in this oracy, where literacy, numeracy and oracy, it's so important. And this school today, it warmed up, right? But at the start, when I was just sort of, knocking back a few things with the kids, and I said to one of them, she said, "What do you think about politics?" And she said, "I don't know." Now, that wasn't because she doesn't know things and doesn't think things. She clearly lacked the confidence to say it out loud to me in a place like that. And so I think we've got to we've got to build up people's confidence to think they can make a difference.
Do you think it is partly the problem that people don't see politics as relevant to their everyday lives? Whereas you and I can talk to, we're blue in the face, well, every law that's passed will affect somebody.
Correct.
I mean, a massive number of people. And therefore, it does affect your ordinary life, even though you think it doesn't. But it's quite difficult to get that over, isn't it?
It is, but even the laws that aren't passed, even just the nature of the debate affects everybody. That guy today, the kid today who was sort of so angry about Suella Braverman, he's affected by that. And he's emotionally affected by that. It was almost physical.
But that's one issue. And I think most people, whether they're young or not, that they're more interested in one issue than another issue, but they don't see party politics as relevant to this,
No.
and therefore that young guy might get involved in some refugee charity to put his views forward,
and that's fine, by the way. And I say in the book that I'm a great admirer of Greta Thunberg. I think that she, to me, is the living proof that one person can make a difference in a big way. And I said to these kids today that the three most important letters in the word activism are the first three. It's act. What are you going to do? Tweeting and signing petitions, it's all fine, but it doesn't achieve that much unless you act and you do stuff. And the book, I've got loads of stories of individuals who've made a difference, got the law changed. Gina Martin, the upskirting law. One woman has something bad happens to her, discovers it's not illegal, gets the law changed.
And there are lots of examples of this.
So many.
But maybe the media is partly to blame here in that we don't cover these individual stories.
I think politics itself, though, I think politicians are so bad at talking up politics.
I mean, I had Anna Firth, who succeeded David Amos in Southend West on this week, and she's put a 10-minute rule bill in to criminalise dog owners who allow their dogs to kill other dogs, like letting them off the leads in the park. Wow. I mean, you might not think that's a massive issue, but for the dog owners whose dogs are killed, it really, really is. I know you've got a small dog. Yeah. And this is all because one of her constituents came to her surgery and said, well, this is what happened to my dog. It was ripped in two by two big dogs. She's taken this up. She thinks the government might well come on board with it. Yeah. And I mean, that might be the only thing she ever achieves in politics. Yeah. Who knows? But that will affect individual people.
Well, I write in the book about, so David Steele to you and me is like a big historic political figure. Led the Liberals for years, been around for years. And I say in the book that when he dies, no doubt there'll be reference to the Cyril Smith sex case and the cover-up and all that stuff. But actually, David Steele got the law changed on abortion. And today's abortion laws, not just in the UK, but where they were followed around the world, flowed from a single piece of legislation that he fought for and he won. That's real legacy. And so I think you're right that people look at politics and they just see the stuff that we see in the telly, Sunak and Keir Starmer shouting at each other in the Commons, scandal here, scandal there. I wouldn't underestimate how much damage having 4 years listening to Trump and several years with Johnson as the main figure here, it's done a huge damage to the body politic, I think.
We will talk more in just a moment, and Alastair's going to take your calls as well. 0345 6060 973 is the number if you want to have a word with him. It's 17 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
Alastair Campbell is here talking about his book, But What Can I Do? Some people have said that this is a really good idea for a book, but you're the wrong person to write it. Do you understand why they say that?
Who are these people?
Well,
Show them to me.
Obviously malcontents, but you know what they mean, though, in that you are still considered as a sort of master of spin, sort of black arts and all the rest of it, which I mean, we could have a long discussion about all of that, but that is how you are still perceived by many people.
Yeah, by some people, but I don't care really. I mean, I think that I think I've got a very good, I've got pretty good self-awareness. I know there are some people who think like that. I think they're mainly journalists, to be honest, and plus, you know, a lot of the Corbynistas probably say that. People on the far right, maybe, but my sense of people going around the place is that I get the same with Tony Blair. Tony Blair is sort of seen as, you know,
Sir Tony Blair,
Tony Blair, K, whatever. I'm not very good at recognising honours, but the number of people I meet around the place who say, "God, I wish he was back." I mean, it happens all the time. You have no sense of that in the kind of political debate. So honestly, Ian, I reached a position a long time ago, genuinely, of thinking if you spend all your time worrying what people are going to say about what you think and what you say and what you do, you're never going to do anything. Do I think I have a legitimate voice in this debate about the state of our media and the state of our politics? I think I do, and I'm going to make sure it's heard.
You write in the book, and I'm going to be completely honest, I haven't read the book because of my eyesight issues at the moment, but I'm told that you've got quite a lot of reverence for Margaret Thatcher in the book.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, that's what my colleague who has read the book says.
No. What I say is that, I think reverence overstates it. What I say is that when I'm writing about Johnson and Trump and populism and polarisation and post-truth, that all previous prime ministers, so for example, I say of Margaret Thatcher that I never, ever, ever saw her as a liar. I never saw her as somebody who didn't have a genuine commitment to public service. I never saw her as somebody who didn't genuinely believe what she said she believed at the dispatch box and in party conference speeches and all that, and that she was driven by a real combination of that sort of public service and values. And I think Johnson's the opposite to that. And I also did say, I think I say in the book, that when she died, I did find myself feeling less disrespectful of her than I had for much of the time when I was covering her as Prime Minister.
You look at the scale of the challenges that face the country, the world at the moment, and I mean, you'd have to be a pretty self-confident person to go into politics nowadays and think, I've got the answer to all of this. And you're probably not an appropriate person to go into politics if you do think like that in some ways. But how do we as a society try to meet those challenges? I know you talk about this in the first part of the book, the scale of the challenges that we've got.
Well, that is you see, the point I made to these kids at the schools today is that in the Eatons and the Harrows and the Winchesters and the St Pauls, they do get taught to think that they do always have the answers, that they wouldn't ever say, I don't know. And what's more, I mean, I quote David Cameron's autobiography where you lose count very, very quickly in the book of how often he says, I know I was right about this was the right thing to do. And that sense of, I think you do need confidence, but I think what we've got to try to persuade people is that, because I think you're right, that part of the purpose of the book is to try and broaden the gene pool in politics. Our politicians today come from a very narrow gene pool, both sides. And I quote a lot at various stages of the writing process. I sent the drafts out to a network of young people around the country. And one of the most interesting things that came back from them was how hard they found it to get into the political party that they wanted to be part of, including my own nephew, he's actually now leader of a council. But he said to me that, you know, when he first read the first draft, he said, look, this isn't right. This is too romantic. You've lived your political life like always at the top alongside the leader who became the Prime Minister. You try being young, with a job, with a family, not that much time, going into a local party where most people have got white hair, and the first thing they say when you give them an idea is, oh, we don't do it like that. Try and change that. And, you know, the number of young people I've met who say, I've only ever been to one political party meeting. Yeah. Well, that's the parties have got to change, not the people.
But they seem incapable of changing. If you join your local Conservative Party, everyone's delighted about it. And then the next thing that happens is they send you a letter saying, "Oh, we're doing a fundraising initiative. Can you give us more money?" And then they get another one the next week saying, "We need more money for this."
Or can you take these 500 leaflets around and put them around the state where nobody's going to vote Tory?
Yeah.
No, I think things are changing. So if you go back to Tony, when Tony first became an MP, part I think of what made him become the leader was the fact that in his local constituency in Sedgefield, they were changing the way they did politics. And there are some great local parties around the place, but I think they're the exception rather than the rule.
Ed in Notting Hill has texted in on the schools issue. He says, "You can tell that Alastair did not go to public school because he clearly doesn't understand the dynamics. Public schools do not teach children how to be confident or to believe their opinions matter. Public school pupils gain confidence as they understand that they get privileged. They're privileged getting an excellent education and are encouraged by everyone around them to set their sights higher. They're imbued with potential. I think it's the encouragement to succeed that Alastair is referring to."
Maybe, yeah, there's something in that, but they do actually, so for example, this thing about oracy, if you
It's a horrible word.
Well, it's, think of a better one then. What can I do, Ian? Think of a better word than oracy. So speaking, communication, call it what you want. But you go to Eton, I can't remember the cost, but they've got a debating chamber there specifically built for the art of debate, costing millions and millions of pounds. And they teach them how to debate. And, I think sometimes when you go into state schools and you say, do you do debating? Why don't you think about doing debating? They think, oh, that's what the posh schools do. But I quote in the book, Charles Kennedy, you knew well and good friend of mine, he credits a lot of his success as a politician to the fact that when he was in Lochaber High School, they had a debating club.
Yeah.
And that was how he got his confidence.
The difference between you and me is that you go and speak in private schools. I don't.
I don't.
You don't?
No.
Oh, well, how do you know that Eton have got a debating chamber?
Because it's on their website.
Okay.
As are their 40 football
I don't look at their
pitches
website either, but I don't do it because I don't like private schools. You and I would disagree on the future of private schools. I certainly wouldn't want them to disappear. But I just think they get all the good speakers. I'll go and speak to others.
That's why I don't. That's why Robert Peston's thing, Speakers for Schools, is a very good thing. No, listen, I've spoken in 2 state schools today, and I'll be doing another couple next week. I would go into state. I actually did get. I think I might go and do Eton because I think we'd quite like to get the head teacher on the podcast. I think he's up for it. And I did say a few years ago, Eton asked me to go and talk there. I said, I'll come as long as I'm allowed to bring a TV crew and we can put the whole thing online. And they didn't want that idea.
No, I wonder why. Let's take a call, shall we? Jason is in Grays in Essex. Jason, hi, what would you like to say?
Hi, Ian. Good evening. Hi, Alastair.
Hello.
You ask, what can I do? I don't want to bring a negative connotation to your conversation, but my question would be, well, what's the point? I campaigned a couple of years after Brexit, from 2018, 2019, for a people's vote, and it's the only time I've ever agreed with Jacob Rees-Mogg that we should have had a second referendum to validate the first one, when we knew what was going on. You and I met a couple of times. Ian and I had multiple debates over Brexit over the years.
Oh, I know who you are now. You used to be Jason in Sutton, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
So I gave up my job, a 6-figure a year salary. I gave up my job to campaign full-time. Flew to Geneva, interviewed the World Trade Organization, went to Stormont, went to Dublin, went to speak with the government in Gibraltar and Spain with the expats, back and forth to Brussels. I did 178 speaking events over 14 months across the United Kingdom, from Edinburgh to Redruth in Cornwall. We were reaching between 4 million, or around about 4 million people a week across social media, on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. 16 million people a month we were reaching at the height of the campaign. And yet we are where we are. There's not a single argument from Brexit that stood up to scrutiny of more than about 2 minutes.
But just because you didn't win, Jason, that doesn't mean to say that it was all pointless.
Or that you give up.
Well, I haven't given up. I'm still banging away online and stuff. But
and on
I need a
LBC.
salary. And on LBC.
Yeah, but Jason, it's funny enough. I actually write a chapter in the book about it's called A Tale of Two Campaigns. One of the campaigns is, do you know who Bill and Bob are?
No.
Friend of Bill. Do you know what a friend of Bill is?
No, I was thinking Bill and Ben. But
Okay, so a friend of Bill is somebody who attends AA meetings, because the whole thing started with two guys called Bill and Bob in America.
Okay.
And from that has grown this enormous global organisation called AA, and you've now got Narcotics and Gamblers Anonymous, etc. So that's one campaign that I write about, incredible. And the second campaign I write about is the one you mentioned, the People's Vote campaign. And I explain why it imploded. And it imploded for all sorts of reasons, but the main ones were to do with leadership. And you're absolutely right that it's incredibly frustrating. We organised, the People's Vote campaign organised 3 of the biggest 4 marches in the history of the last century. And they've all gone. Those people, the people are still around, but the arguments have gone. Now, I made a speech last week where I said the title of the speech was "What one generation does, the next generation can undo." If you still feel as strongly as you do, don't walk away from it and don't give up. You can you keep campaigning.
That's a really interesting point, because I've been really surprised that there is still, even 3 years after we left the EU, there is still no official "Let's Rejoin" campaign.
I know. And it's partly, I think this is where our parliamentary politics is so important, because if you have neither Labour nor the Lib Dems really striking that pose, the SNP a bit more strong, the Greens a bit stronger, but it means that, you know, if there's no grassroots organisation focused on that, the European movement is definitely moving in that direction. But I honestly do think, I said in the speech, Jason, I'm a great believer in the great quote of the ice hockey player from Canada, Wayne Gretzky: "Skate to where the puck is going, not where it's been." The Brexit debate is moving in one direction, in my view. I think within 5 years, Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson will say they voted Remain. I don't know about you, Ian. I don't know whether you're ever going to get around to say that, you know, you maybe think it wasn't a great idea.
No.
Okay, good. All right. Okay. Well, stick to your principles.
I accept that it's been very problematic.
It's disastrous.
But anyway, we don't want to go
anyway,
into
Jason, what I'm saying is what
Brexit.
you can do is you keep going.
Jason, thank you very much indeed. I want to, in a moment after the news, I just want to ask you about where Labour are heading on this issue, because I think there have been a couple of developments this week which have slightly surprised me, but we'll come on to that in just a moment. Okay. If you'd like to talk to Alastair, still time to get a call in at 0345 6060973. It's 8:32. Daryl Jackson has the news headlines.
A mother's seen 2 teenagers given life sentences for the murder of her 15-year-old son and warned the violence has to stop. Jacqueline Payuzzi and Giovanni Harriet, who are 15 and 17, will spend at least 34 years in jail for stabbing Kyrie McLean to death in Huddersfield last year. 20,000 staff at 14 rail firms will strike on the eve of the FA Cup final in an ongoing row over pay. The action by the RMT members on June the 2nd comes ahead of a walkout by train drivers on the day of the match itself. And water companies admit consumers will have to pay towards the cost of upgrading England's sewers. £10 billion is being invested after more than 800 sewage spills a day last year. LBC weather: patchy rain through northern England tonight, but it will clear in Northern Ireland and Scotland. Mostly dry for southern England and Wales, and lows of 6 degrees.
LBC. Iain Dale on LBC.
8:36. Alastair Campbell is with us talking about his book, But What Can I Do? Just before we go back to the calls, interesting developments with Labour this week on Europe, in that they floated this idea, well, more than floated it, I think Keir Starmer genuinely believes it, as votes for EU citizens, and also saying he'd renegotiate the trade deal, each of which leads people in the red wall seats who went away from Labour at the last election to think, oh, they really want to go back in, don't they? And he spent the last 18 months basically trying to reassure them that he doesn't want to do that. What's the strategy there?
Well, by the way, I do think there's this kind of monolithic view about the so-called Red Wall, that they're all sitting up there obsessed by Brexit. I just don't buy it. And most of the people, I go to Burnley a lot, as you know, and I was up in Leeds and Harrogate this week, and talking to these business people in Leeds, they were basically just saying, look, you know, whatever way you voted on Brexit, we know it's not working. I think Labour needs to move the language from make Brexit work to fix Brexit. There's so much that is going to have to be fixed. So I actually think the thing about the trade arrangements are going to have to be renegotiated. There's no way, they're not sustainable at the moment. So,
well, they have to be in 2025 anyway.
Exactly. So I think that, and on the EU citizens being able to vote, I don't actually know what the facts are on that. I saw it floated. I was a bit suspicious of the fact that it came out in the Sunday Telegraph and then the Mail and that.
Well, it's been discussed by official Labour policy formation groups, and Keir Starmer, he was on with Nick Ferrari on Monday, was asked about it, and he's clearly quite clear on, quite keen on
But it's not
it.
a European thing. It's about people who live here and settle
But the
here.
way it's being presented is that it's about a European thing.
Well, the presentation.
Well,
I mean,
indeed.
Iain,
They need you back.
Who controls presentation?
I mean, Gordon Brown wanted you back. Ed Miliband wanted you back.
Jeremy Corbyn,
no. They need you back.
Well, there you go.
Just on Jeremy Corbyn, in the next hour, we're going to be talking about him because he still wants to stand in Islington North. His local Labour Party do. Do you think there's any prospect of that happening?
Well, it seems to me that Keir's been pretty firm about that not happening. I do think that Keir was pretty clear right from the word go that the anti-Semitism thing, he saw it as a genuine problem that really damaged the Labour Party, and felt that Jeremy's response to it wasn't adequate, and so I doubt that is going to happen, to be honest.
You're still not a member of the Labour Party?
I'm not, no.
Why?
No. I've quite enjoyed the relative freedom. I mean, I'm still very tribally Labour. I was kicked out for, I think it's 5 years, my sentence, for voting Lib Dem in the European elections to get them to change the Brexit policy.
Well, that's coming up that soon, isn't it? So you could go back.
Well, no, because it was in the 2019. No. Anyway, it's been indicated to me that I'd be welcome back, and they'd like it if I applied to go back, and I'm sure I will at some point. But interestingly, so when I made that speech about Europe last week, I know I'm not an MP, and I'm not, I'm not attached in the same way as I was. But I think I'd have been less frank about my views of Labour's Brexit strategy if I had been a member.
Right, let's go to Carl in Canterbury. Hello, Carl.
Good evening, Germans. Alastair. My question is to Alastair, and the question is, as an elder statesman, shall we say, with regards to the British political system of recent years, how do you feel on this dissemination of two-party politics? And what I mean by that is that it has been clearly proven to us over the past 13 years that one party in control of the country does not work. It only has a finite life. Moreover, the opposition are stuck in the limbo where they can't really do anything with such a colossal majority. Is the days of 2- and 3-party politics over? And would you like to see a more integrated political system where people who are voted into the Houses of Parliament, or whatever the system might be, have a much greater input into how the country grows, rather than this terrible situation we find ourselves in?
I mean, I definitely have moved on this, and I think my opinion on the whole political system is moving fast. I mean, I said to Ian earlier that when I writing the book, I'm desperate for there to be a change of government, but I think there's got to be a change of politics, the way we do politics. I've always been opposed to proportional representation, but I think we need some form of electoral reform. I think that people are really sick to death of the system that you're describing. I actually really would like to see the voting age lowered. I'd like to see compulsory voting. I'd like to see political education in schools, and I don't just mean for kids who are studying politics, but I mean to learn about politics from an early age. And I think we've got to kind of revive our politics. I think we should probably be looking at things like citizen assemblies on some of the big policy challenges that we face. So yeah, I think all of this stuff should be up for grabs. Listen, none of it's straightforward, by the way. People think PR, that'd be great, everybody's vote would count, but there's no system that's perfect.
Everybody's vote counts at the moment.
Say again?
Everybody's vote counts at the moment.
It does. It's just
but
that
you can't persuade people. That
exactly,
is the case.
Exactly. So, but what they mean by that really is that they don't feel that their vote counts because their vote is not reflected in the outcome. So, if you vote Green, you vote Lib Dem, you think, well, where did that lead to? And then I do think the other thing I think that's interesting is yesterday. This event I was at yesterday was a local government event, and there was Georgia Gould, who's the Camden Council leader, and also a woman who was until recently the Tory leader of Stoke-on-Trent City Council. And it was really interesting listening to them basically saying that they felt they have way more power in terms of, leading a local council than they do, certainly as an MP and actually as a lot of ministers. And I think that some of the stuff that Andy Burnham has been talking about greater devolution to the cities and to the regions and the nations of the UK, that's the way we've got to go. I actually would like to see the House of Lords go away and morph into something where the nations and the regions are reflected as a second chamber. So listen, I think there's loads and loads of stuff that can be done, but it needs a government to come in and say, right, because what the problem with the current government is they're constantly just defending the status quo. Apart from the stuff that they're changing, that is, as Keir said in his speech at the weekend, that they no longer appear to be very conservative about certain things. But I think if Labour came in and said, this is not just about a change of government, we've got to change politics. And I think it is one of those areas where you need the equivalent of some sort of long-term political commission that starts to allow people to express ideas and have a proper debate about how we change politics. I think if we just have a change of government, it won't be enough.
Rebecca on an Alexa message says, Ian, hurry up and admit that you made a mistake voting for Brexit. Alastair, well, it says give him a pinch. I thought it said give him a punch, which I thought was a little bit over the top, if I may say so. I'll make my announcements in my own time.
That means, Rebecca, that means he's on the way to making it.
I'm absolutely not. Right, let's go to Ben in Beckenham. Hello, Ben.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. What would you like to say?
So I'm a young person and I find myself talking a lot to older family members who are more on the conservative side. And I often find they've been sort of almost radicalised by, you could sort of say, right-wing newspapers such as the Daily Mail and things they see on the television. And I was wondering what Alastair thinks is the best way to sort of approach political conversations with sort of older conservative family members for me as a young person.
So you've triggered him now by mentioning the Daily Mail.
Actually, the loudest applause I got at this event in Leeds yesterday was when somebody said, what can we do to change the nature of our media debate? And I said, if any of you ever read the Daily Mail, just stop. Just say no. It's like heroin. Just don't do it. Look, I think if you...
There's only so much about Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby that you can take.
No, the right-wing papers in this country are a bit of a poison. I think they do have an impact, less maybe than they did. I think for you, it's... How old are you, Ben?
17.
Right, okay. Well, look, I think you are absolutely within your rights to say to your parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, whoever it might be, just to say to them, do you realise that by absorbing the stuff that they're feeding you, much of which is untrue, much of which is biased and tendentious, you're actually having a detrimental impact upon my future? I think you should call them out on it. And I think you should...
See, I don't think that is the right approach. I think if you say that to older people, they immediately put their defensive shutters up.
Some will.
Don't get it.
Some will, some won't. But I think you can... Look, I regularly challenge people when I quite often do go up to people and say, why are you reading that newspaper?
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Just random strangers?
Yeah.
You're the nutter on the bus, aren't
I'm
you?
not a nutter on the bus. You can't use words like that.
I
You
know,
know, I'm a mental health campaign.
I actually pulled out Nick Clegg for using that word once.
Did
so,
you?
yeah,
Did
yeah.
you?
But
No.
it is
So,
a
but
common
I
phrase.
don't do it in a nasty way. But I say, I do say things like, do you think that story there? Do you think it's true? Do you think there's a reason why that? And also the
And they
other
say to you, but Alastair, I'm reading the match report on the Burnley match.
yeah, well, there might be, but that's like that's like a gateway drug. So, but Ben, I think it's legitimate to say to people that the thing about our newspapers is that they're political players as well. They're not spectators anymore. They're political players, and I think it's important to understand that media ownership in this country, that's another issue, by the way, I think the Labour government should address. Our media is largely owned by a very, very small group of very, very wealthy, very right-wing people who live abroad and don't pay much tax. They need to know that. So you don't have to be horrible to them, but just tell them they're kind of wrecking your future. They definitely do. If those papers help them to vote Brexit, they've stolen your future, I would argue.
Ben, thank you very much, and I'm not going to rise to the bait. Anthony says, really enjoying your conversation with Alastair. His podcasts with Rory are so interesting, and long may they continue. Please pass this on to him. Well, there is a similar podcast that you might, in fact, they got the idea from us, that Jackie Smith and I do called For the Many. We recorded our latest edition this afternoon. It might be actually be up later this evening or tomorrow morning. And also, if you haven't had enough of me talking to Alastair, you could come to see us at the Buxton Literary Festival.
Yeah, when is that?
That is July the 22nd at the Buxton Opera
That's
House.
my sister's birthday.
The scene of me falling off the stage
Oh,
into the
of
orchestra
course,
pit.
yeah.
So you can have some fun with that as a freebie.
I won't do that. Do you want me to play my bagpipes?
No.
My bagpipes are going down a storm.
Really?
The rest is politics. Live shows, yeah.
You can bring them in. That's a bit heavy to take to Buxton.
I can take them anywhere. I love my bagpipes.
Okay.
Have bagpipes, we'll travel.
Thank God you haven't brought them into the studio.
How do you know I haven't?
It's 8:48.
LBC. Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
It's 8:51. Let's go to David, who's in Enfield. Hello, David.
Good evening. Good evening, Alastair.
Hello.
Alastair, I've got two quick questions. First one is, do you think we've reached the point now where the country needs a written constitution? And the second question is, should the king continue as the head of state? Should the monarch be the head of state? I say that because the last 3 years since Johnson came into power, we've seen him trying to basically accumulate as much power as he can in the executive. And he's really sort of like turned into a Roman emperor almost. And he had the situation where he unlawfully prorogued Parliament, and then he tried to force through the Brexit vote. And if Regina Miller hadn't taken both cases to court as a private individual, it would have been a serious problem. We have a Privy Council. They seem powerless when she was advised to do that. So my question is, if the head of state is actually a political eunuch and he's not acting as a check and balance on a rogue government, what's the point of that?
God, there's a lot in
They
there.
talk about nothing but a written constitution down the dog and duck, don't they?
Well, yeah, but I think they do talk about the state of our politics.
Yeah, of course.
And I think there is a lot of anger about the state of our politics. I mean, I think that, look, I think if you were starting our democracy from scratch, I think you'd have a written constitution. I'd like a process. I'd like a constitutional process that led, maybe not so much to a written constitution way, because you'd have so many problems about how you adopted previous laws that had already passed, but something that maybe renewed our democracy and that renewed the principles underlying our constitution. I mean, the damage that Johnson did. I said to Ian earlier that the damage that Johnson did, I think, was fundamental, because I say in the book that our entire system has rested on this idea that all MPs are honourable. And when they're not honourable, they're expelled, okay? And you had that ridiculous situation where Ian Blackford, the SNP leader, and other MPs getting expelled for calling Johnson a liar, which actually was the truth. And I think people look at that and think that that's just crazy. But that's because the good chaps theory of government doesn't work when you have a bad actor like Johnson. So you could then say, well, he's gone. That's true. But I think the after effects, the fact that he's still kind of around in the ether, that Sunak still has to bend to some of the people and the ideas that Johnson put forward. So I'd like a kind of some sort of process by which we can review and renew the principles underpinning our constitution, our political system. What form would that take? I don't know. And then on the monarchy, I was asked about this at the school today, and I find myself becoming less of a Republican than I was, partly because of Johnson.
Because you're getting more right wing as you get older.
No, Rory Stewart says I'm getting more left wing.
Does he?
Yeah, he does. He thinks I'm getting much. No, he's wobbling, I'd say, but he thinks I'm getting more left wing. No, I'll tell you why. I think because I think Johnson, funnily enough, has made me think. I mean, who would be if we had an elected president at the moment? Who are the candidates that might be up for that?
Joanna Lumley.
Well, in which case we're just talking celebrity, aren't we? We're not talking.
Yeah, but that's what it would be.
Yeah, maybe.
I genuinely think it would be.
I'll tell you who I love. My favourite head of state, President Higgins in Ireland. Absolutely love him.
Why is it the Irish always seem to have really interesting presidents?
Well,
they've got no power, have they?
We've got Mary McAleese coming up on the podcast soon. She's
have you
brilliant.
been listening to my Irish Taoiseach podcast?
I enjoyed your Irish Taoiseach podcast because I'm very interested in Irish politics, as you know.
I've become very interested.
Yeah. Well, we've got Leo on Monday.
Have you?
Yeah.
See, I'm trying to get him to my Edinburgh show.
Oh,
Can you put in a word?
I'll put a word in.
Thank you.
Worry.
His people have got the invitation.
Have they? His people. Well, I don't deal with the people. I deal with the people.
Yeah, okay. Will says, in the spirit of why can't we all just get along, who is Alastair's favourite Tory PM and current Tory MP?
Oh, I actually find myself in this book writing fulsomely about a speech that John Major made 2 years ago in Democracy We Trust. I have grown to respect John Major a lot.
But you didn't say that in 1996.
I didn't say that in 1997. I was absolutely brutal, and I sometimes feel bad about it. So, I think probably John Major, actually.
Okay.
And my favourite current Tory MP, I like Johnny Mercer. Is that a good thing to like?
Yeah, he's a decent guy.
I thought Penny Mordaunt was. I thought her upper body was magnificent.
Down boy.
Listen, the arms.
No, stop it.
I'm sorry.
Stop it. You're going to get yourself into trouble.
Okay.
I can't let that happen. Let's go to Salam, particularly if Fiona's listening. Salam is in Kilburn. Hello, Salam.
Hello there. Can one hear me?
Yes, we can. What would you like to say?
All right. It's to Alastair. I'm a Labour voter, and I'd vote Labour in the next general election. But I think a lot of people that I know around me aren't really I don't think I've known anyone who voted, especially in the local elections, and especially with the voter turnout. I know Labour got a good result, but the turnout was still really low. So I'm kind of thinking about the next general election. To Alastair, what would you say to people who are on the fence about voting for Labour, and what does Labour need to do to reach out to them and make sure they actually get a proper majority?
That's a fascinating question, because someone said to me the other day that people have decided they don't want to vote Tory anymore. It's the time for a change thing.
Yeah.
But Keir Starmer hasn't sealed that deal.
Well, we did an event, Rory Stewart and I did an event in Harrogate the other night, and we asked the audience who they thought would be Prime Minister in 2 years, and 80% said Keir Starmer. We then asked them, we had the lights up, could anybody in the audience give an explanation as to what Labour's economic policy was? One hand went up, and it was a guy who turned out he was a Labour candidate. We asked them if they knew what the 5 missions were, and it was the same guy. So I think you've actually answered the question yourself in saying, what do Labour need to do? Labour need to make sure that the message around that people go into when we get to the election, the message that people have in their minds and in the conversations that are going on around the country are not just about the Tories having failed in 13 years, but there is a really strong, clear sense of what Labour want to do, say, for the next 5-10 years. And, we had George Osborne on the podcast this week, and I really urge Labour people, we argued about austerity inevitably, but when you get onto his analysis of politics today, he actually said something very interesting. He said, look, I follow politics very, very closely. As you know, Ian, he's a political obsessive, much more than Cameron. And he said, I follow this stuff very, very closely. I don't know what I describe Labour's economic policy as. I don't know what they're saying on education. I don't know what they're saying on housing. I don't know what they're saying on health. And Labour can't expect the public to imagine. They've got to come up with those answers themselves, and they've got to be clear. Lots of the front bench I speak to, they say, we've got loads of policy that just the people don't know them yet. Well, that's not the people's fault. You've got to have really strong, clear strategy and message and policy that connects with people. And you've got to give people hope. You've really got to give people hope, because people feel at the moment that politics is just not kind of delivering for them. And listen, I think it's there to be done. I do like the way that Keir's kind of gone very methodically. Stage 1, decontaminate the party brand post-Corbyn. Stage 2, show the Tories are useless. Stage 3, now set out the policy, the positive agenda. And I guess the last thing they should do is get this book that we've been talking about, Ian. What's it called again?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Alastair, because I do have it in my hand here. And I have to say, when I announced that you were coming on the programme today, it's the usual suspects wanted to say, what's he got to say that anybody's interested in? Well, as proof that people are interested in what Alastair's got to say, it's number 1 in the bestseller charts, isn't it?
After 3
and you
days.
don't get to number 1 unless you're saying something interesting. He gets thousands of people coming to see him in theatres all around the country. And I am going to read this book when
your eyes are fixed.
I might get the audio. Did you do an audio book?
Yeah, I've done the audio.
Maybe
that's in the charts as well.
Is it?
Very happy.
What position?
It's not 1, annoyingly.
But what can I do? It's called Why Politics Has Gone So Wrong and How You Can Help Fix It. That's by Alastair Campbell. Thank you very much for coming in. We're going to be talking about Labour in the next hour, because Jeremy Corbyn has told his local Labour Party in Islington North that he wants to carry on as their MP. They seem to want him to carry on as their MP, but Keir Starmer and Labour's National Executive Committee do not. And they have the ultimate power over whether he can stand at the next election. What do you think should happen here? Because I think even his worst enemies would accept that he's actually been quite a good constituency MP. He's almost been provoked to stand as an independent, and I suspect that's what he will do. What do you think should happen here? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call here on LBC.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, 2 teenagers have been jailed for at least 34 years between them for the murder of a 15-year-old in Huddersfield. Kyrie McLean was stabbed to death outside his school in September last year. A judge says his killers can now be identified as 15-year-old Jacquiel Payuzzi and Giovanni Harriet, who's 17. Detective Constable Lee Swift has been reading a statement outside court from Kyrie's mother, Charlie.
Nobody has won in this situation. I've lost a child and other parents have lost 2 children who committed this offence and are now in prison. This violence has to stop. Carrying weapons, especially knives, has to stop.
Rail staff with the RMT union will walk out across 14 train operators in their ongoing row over pay on the 2nd of June. Meanwhile, the National Education Union says teachers will walk out again in July if their pay isn't resolved by the middle of next month. The Scottish First Minister has confirmed a man who abducted and sexually abused a girl is being held in a male prison. A court heard how 53-year-old Andrew Miller is currently transitioning but asked to be referred to as he at the time of his arrest. LBC's political editor in Scotland, Gina Davidson, says he admitted a number of charges at the High Court in Edinburgh.
Andrew Miller, who also goes by the name Amy George, pled guilty to the charges, and those offences included abduction, sexual assault, possession of indecent images of children, and intentionally causing a child under the age of 13 to look at a sexual image, so a whole host of charges against him.
Water companies admit customers will have to pay towards the cost of upgrading England's sewers. £10 billion is being invested after more than 800 sewage spills a day last year. Campaigner Ed Acterson is from Save Our Seas.
It's just so enormously frustrating when you see that they're taking £1 billion plus a year in dividends and the CEOs are getting paid £25 million a year. And then we're being told, well, if you want this issue fixed, you're going to have to pay again. But we've already paid for it once.
The Queen's funeral last year cost the UK government an estimated £161 million. The Treasury says departments spent the money because their priority was ensuring events went smoothly. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 19 points at 77.42. The pound buys $1.24 and €1.15. LBC weather: patchy rain for northern England tonight, but it will be clear in Northern Ireland and Scotland. Mostly dry for southern England.